So I want to talk to you all about diet. Your big thing is ultra processed foods. And I want to talk to you about why should people care about diet? Can you not just exercise your way out of a bad diet? What is this impact that people should change their lives to think about what they're eating?
Great question. And diet is one of the biggest things that influences both our mental health and our physical health. And the great thing is, we have almost 100% control over it. So we control what we buy in the shops, what we bring into our house, what we eat on a day to day basis, because we can't control our genetics. So what we eat matters. And the whole subject on ultra processed foods is a fairly new conversation. And I think with new conversations comes a lot of confusion and also nuance. And I was asked to write my book earlier this year. So back in January, Penguin got in touch, and you might have, like listeners might have read Chris Von Tolleken's Ultra Processed People book, which almost sparked the debate and I suppose the issues around the ethics of these big companies going into different countries and, infiltrating the way that cultures have been eating for thousands of years. And the main problem that we've got is that we are not eating enough whole foods. So my book, although the title is called How Not to Eat Ultra Processed, actually it's about cutting down, not out. And it's about maybe leaning on the more nutritious ultra processed foods, because I still have them in my cupboard. I have more nutritious and less nutritious, because it's what we are doing the majority of the time that matters most when it comes to diet. So I talk about the 80-20 rule. If you are eating an 80% nutritious whole food diet, 20% of the time you can totally have your soul foods, your daily chocolate or even sweets, ice cream, as long as it's in that ratio overall, across the day, across the week. And that's why I encourage people, if they're wanting to know where do I start with a food diary, figure out what is going on right now. I do want to mention, though, the definition of ultra processed foods. There is no agreed global definition, and we're still waiting for the UK to adopt one at the moment. We're using Nova, which was coined in 2009 in Brazil. The problem with that definition is that it says that ultra processed foods, by definition, they are foods that are created in factories. You cannot make them at home. They often contain multiple ingredients, including those that are not found in your home kitchen, like emulsifiers, preservatives, colors, flavorings. Now, there's nothing wrong with these additives on a molecular level in small doses, but together, through processing, they make these foods very moreish, easy to eat, and hyperpalatable. So they almost encourage overconsumption. But the problem with the definition is that you've got people saying, well, my hummus is a UPF because it contains one preservative, or my Weetabix because it contains barley malt extract. You wouldn't usually find that in a home kitchen, even though you can actually buy it from health food shops. So I would like to see the definition of UPFs being a product that is low in whole foods, so low in protein, low in fiber, and contains more than one ingredient that you wouldn't usually find in your home kitchen. And just to compare two brands, for example, like Nutri-Grain snack bar and a Naked bar, they both contain natural flavorings, but you can totally make a Naked bar at home. You can buy natural flavorings from a Whole Foods website, whereas a Nutri-Grain bar, the ingredients list is super long, and it doesn't just contain natural flavoring as an additive. It contains a whole plethora of other. And, you can have Nutri-Grain bars, but maybe the Naked bar is the better choice for your health. So that's just a little summary and introduction.
I think that's super interesting because I was actually going to ask you, how would you define it? Because it's one of those things that everyone should know what the definition of it is, because it's obvious, it says it in the name. But actually, when you break down, like, what actually is it and where is the line? Because I think, like I mentioned to you before we started recording, I'm a healthy person who loves exercising, who loves living a healthy lifestyle as much as I can. But even when it comes to the technological and scientific side of diet, it's scary. You immediately think, oh my goodness, do I have to calorie count everything? What are my macros? What is my, carb breakdown and protein intake and everything like that, which are really important aspects. But it's also about sustainable diet and not these flash diets that kind of come out and suddenly you say, okay, I'm going to like get rid of it all and make everything myself and have my own homesteading and, milk my own cow and whatever it is. But what are some surprising ultra processed foods that you might not expect them to be classed as that are in our everyday diet we might not even realize?
Yeah, so I mean, most foods are processed in some way, whether that be drying, canning, tinning, even freezing. So processing alone is actually a good thing. It helps to keep our food shelf stable and safe to eat. And like you said, there's no reason that you need to go on a 100% UPF free diet. And I don't believe it's possible living in the UK. If you've got a family, you work, you want a social life, and actually there's no need. So when you look at the data, why are we starting to talk about UPFs? It's because there is a growing body of evidence that shows that diets that are high in UPFs are associated with a variety of negative health outcomes: obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease. So the question is why? So the first reason might be what I said at the start: the hyperpalatability. It's really easy to eat. And the second is the fact that if you're eating a lot of UPFs which are low in vitamins and minerals, ice cream, biscuits, sweets, then it's what aren't you eating enough of? You're not eating enough of your whole foods, which contain vitamins, minerals, fiber, like your fruits, your veggies, beans, lentils, pulses, even like meat, fish, eggs, dairy. They're all like minimally processed foods. So the question is, what aren't you eating? Now, to answer the question, like, what are the surprising foods which are technically classed by NOVA as ultra processed, but actually they are very nutritious and their benefits outweigh any small amount of preservative. I would say I've mentioned hummus, most sliced wholemeal breads, Weetabix and other whole grain breakfast cereals. What other surprising? I've got fish fingers. I would say, fish fingers are highly nutritious. My kids eat them. You can get the ones that are fortified with omega-3. And just because they might contain one ingredient that you wouldn't usually find in a home kitchen, well, that's a very small portion. Even dark chocolate, most dark chocolate contains the emulsifier soy lecithin, but actually it's not one of the emulsifiers with question marks around. So in my book, I highlight that there are 3 emulsifiers with question marks around, which early research, mainly in rodents, shows that in large amounts, these emulsifiers may cause gut inflammation, especially in susceptible people. So they've been linked with irritable bowel disease, IBD, so P80, CMC, and carrageenan. However, these emulsifiers are found in very small amounts in the UK diet, and actually the foods that they are found in tend to be like the classic junk foods, like your ice cream, which you shouldn't be having in large quantities anyway. I will say though that I did find one of those emulsifiers in my tinned coconut milk, and I have decided that because we have coconut milk on a weekly basis in my chicken curry, and I give it to my kids, I've actually decided just to buy a different brand. Same cost, it doesn't cost me any more. So that's an example of one simple swap that I've personally made. So coconut milk. Another swap that I've decided to make is bread. So although there's research to show that foods that are high in whole grains are not associated with these negative impacts, even though they might be UPF. So I mentioned sliced wholemeal bread. I have decided that I would like to buy the shortest ingredient list possible for my bread because I eat it often twice a day. It might be at breakfast, it might be at lunch, especially my kids, they'll definitely have it, at one meal or as a snack. So I've chosen to buy sourdough, not from a bakery, but from supermarket, whether it's an own brand or Jason sourdough. And then I think the other swap that I've made, which is a very obvious UPF, is Diet Coke. So I think when I started writing the book, I would have like Diet Coke maybe on a weekly basis, not really thinking too much about it. But I actually decided I think subconsciously, I didn't actually have a glass until it was my husband's 40th recently. And we had it in the fridge and I didn't have it during the party. And then I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to have a nice cold glass. Haven't had it for like 8-9 months. And I didn't just have one glass, I had 3. And it was almost, there's a lot of talk at the moment. Certain doctors are trying to get an addiction to UPFs, like coined as as a disease, as an addiction. It's not quite there, but there is something about these foods, like once you pop, you can't stop, that is very Moorish. I've decided to cut out like diet fizzy drink. Well, not cut out, cut down on diet fizzy drinks because they're not good for your teeth. Sweeteners are safe in moderation, and I would say diet drinks are better than the full sugar because both are UPFs, but you're getting less of that free sugar, less of the added sugar in the diet. So yeah, there's some swaps that I've kind of made, but I'm still keeping in my Aldi hummus, my Weetabix, and an oat milk as well. So my oat milk is technically classed as ultra processed, but it's got added calcium and iodine. My son is allergic to dairy. So yeah, that's an ultra processed food. That is a healthier one that I'm keeping in my diet. And also baked beans. I almost forgot baked beans. So baked beans can be ultra processed or they may not be depending on the ingredients. Mine is because it contains modified maize starch. I decided that, do you know what? That's one ingredient within a product that's really high in vegetables. Contains beans and tomatoes. It's high in fiber, high in plant-based protein. So yeah, they're just like a handful of ingredients that actually, you might not expect, but actually if they provide lots of nutrition, the benefits outweigh any potential downsides.
I love that you mentioned baked beans because I was saying to Nick before the recording that me and my husband have just moved back from France after living there for a year, and one of the first things that my husband Drew bought from the supermarket was baked beans. He was like, "Yes, I have the baked beans back." Do you know the Heinz like 4-pack can, which is just
Yeah.
quite funny because you can buy them. They are smuggled into the French supermarkets at like quadruple the price as you can imagine. But it was just quite funny. But I think it's really interesting the examples that you give because kind of what I alluded to before, there's this kind of stress that comes with, okay, now what should I be eating? What should I not like? How do I remember? And even if you don't remember the names of the ingredients that you should be looking out for, just what you said there is like what's got the shortest ingredients list? Like look at the sourdough. It's literally like a few things that you need. You don't need to make it yourself. You can buy things from the supermarket. And if you can remember which ones to look out for, like which ingredients to look out for that are the bad ones, that's amazing. But even if you just look for the shortest list of the best things, then that is a really easy way to swap it out. I think it's interesting you gave the example of Diet Coke because I actually heard about this study that I think it was 1 in 3 women who addictively drink Diet Coke throughout pregnancy, which would class as drinking one a day. 1 in 3 women's children would be born with autism, which is a very surprising study for someone who hasn't really looked into the impact of diet because I wouldn't really think about, ultra processed foods, but I find that really shocking to the extent it's stuck with me that it's quite a tangible thing of when you are pregnant and growing a child, you would think about what am I eating, what am I putting in my body because of this, child that you're growing. And okay, the Diet Coke is a stark example of that. It's probably not filled with great things, so let's not drink it one a day, or if you can avoid it at all. Alcohol, caffeine, all of these things that are not good for a growing child. However, what about our bodies the rest of our lives that we're living, not just that very small period of life that a woman could be growing a child? What about the rest of the time? What are we putting in our bodies? Alcohol is a really big question. Like some people say 2 units a week, 2 drinks a week. Some people say don't drink it at all. Some people say, oh, it's okay. And what is your view on alcohol? Is it bad? Is it okay? What should we be doing with it?
Yeah, I mean, alcohol, ultimately, if you're teetotal and don't drink, the advice is do not start. If you do drink, then in moderation. There are some studies that show that small amounts of alcohol, but no more than 1 unit, which is half a pint of beer, small glass of wine, 25 mils of spirits, may confer some sort of benefit. And it's mainly leaning towards the alcohols that are high in polyphenols, like the red wine. However, you drink any more than that, and the benefits are completely, washed out. It's not like caffeine and tea and coffee, where there is actually some benefit to having tea and coffee. It's got some really good plant compounds in there and some fiber, and it's a natural stimulant. So, people can safely have it to fuel performance, like 30 to 60 minutes before a workout, maybe give them a little bit of a boost if they're feeling fatigued. But we shouldn't have too much of it. Like, you should ideally stop drinking caffeine after around midday so that it doesn't influence your sleep, which sleep is crucial for making positive choices. And going back to what you said about during pregnancy, another lady mentioned that study actually. And although I haven't looked into it, I think there are always question marks on, is it a study that shows cause and effect, or is it an association? And actually, is somebody who's having at least one can of diet fizzy drink a day, are they also likely to have other negative health behaviors? For example, have they got a low fiber diet? Are they also smoking? Have they got a BMI of over 30? So without looking at the study, I don't know if these confounding factors have been taken into account. Having said that, though, if there are question marks around certain things that you can easily change, then I think why not change it? If you really love Diet Coke and you're pregnant, maybe reduce it. Have it as a once a week treat as opposed to once a day. Or better still, cut it out altogether. Have a little bit of squash with fizzy water, or a handful of frozen berries in soda water, even better, to make it non-ultra processed. And just about the caffeine, I mean, they say that around 400 milligrams for a healthy adult is acceptable, like 4 cups of tea, coffee, although keep in mind that coffees from coffee shops can contain way more, especially if they give double shots as standard. And then if you are pregnant or breastfeeding, keeping it to below 200, so about half. So, if you want your morning tea or coffee, fine, but then maybe switch to decaf after that. So, and definitely abstain from alcohol. Don't have any alcohol if you are knowingly pregnant. Breastfeeding, if you've got a really tiny little baby, don't have it. However, there is guidance out there if you do want it so many hours before breastfeeding, but alcohol does leave the system. I can't remember off the top of my head like how many units per hour, but it will change depending on who you are, your size, how effective your liver is, because obviously alcohol is a toxin. But also keeping in mind that when you are breastfeeding, you're looking after and being responsible for a small baby. And obviously, if you're intoxicated, then you can't do that. So I'm very mindful now. Like, I hardly drink now because I know that the next day I'm looking after 2 small human beings. They're aged 2 and 5 at the moment. So alcohol is something that I definitely don't drink much of. Special occasion, a couple of glasses of Prosecco. And actually, if you do start to cut down on alcohol, you might find that your tolerance also decreases. So you require less of it, to feel an effect.
Yeah, that's so interesting, isn't it? The amount that you should have, and then the awareness of just how long it leaves your body, and the caffeine as well. I think it's quite easy to just kind of get into a routine of it, and just having the awareness of, say, you listen to a podcast and hear a bit about it. It's the low hanging fruit. It's not that you need to overhaul everything you eat and drink and buy and throw everything out of your cupboard and you're left with nothing but like a packet of carrots or something. It's the low hanging fruit. Can I maybe just change this a little bit? Maybe I can go to non-alcoholic gin. It literally tastes the same, do you know? But you still have that nice moment. There's so many lovely mocktails that you can get out in a restaurant that, again, literally taste the same. They're probably even cheaper and they still come in a pretty glass. It's the little things that I think get ingrained with us that we don't really realise. Hold on, it's low hanging fruit. It's not that you need to stop that one thing that brings you joy in your diet. If you really love ice cream, you can still eat ice cream. It's just keeping it in mind. And with that, you kind of talk about different types of hunger. And I wanted you to expand on that. What does that mean? People will probably be like, huh? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been a dietitian for the last 15 years, and it's something that I speak about, definitely every single week in clinic. And I talk about it in my book. Basically, I just poured the last 15 years of what I've been saying and doing into the book, with the, obviously, additions of the new discussions around UPFs. So I talk about hunger in 3 different ways. So head hunger, which is like your cravings; heart hunger, which is your emotions; and stomach hunger, which is almost like a true hunger. So your head hunger, your cravings tends to come on quite suddenly. And it tends to be for quite specific foods, like one food. And it might be triggered by seeing a food, walking past a chocolate bar, hearing a packet of crisps being opened. And the best way to manage head hunger is to change your environment. So I talk about in the book, making the healthy choice the easy choice. In your kitchen, keeping kind of like the high fat, high sugar snacks in an inconvenient cupboard, not out on the side. I remember speaking to one patient and she said, "Oh, I keep eating these like mini snack bars throughout the day." And I was like, "Well, where are they kept?" She was like, "Next to the microwave." I was like, "Right, let's move them. Let's put a fruit bowl out on the side, because then you're more likely to have that fruit if it's easy to access." When you open your fridge, you mentioned carrots. Can you have cut up crudités on your eye level shelf with hummus, tzatziki, salsa? And then the healthy choice is the easy choice. So that's your head hunger. Your emotions, your heart hunger. I would say, if you're eating out of stress, boredom, anger, occasionally eating out of heart hunger is fine. But if food is your default, or if it's happening on a regular basis, then it may be problematic for health. And the best thing to do is, when you're feeling positive and good, is to come up with an if-then strategy. So write down, if I'm feeling angry, I'm going to take myself out into nature. If I'm feeling lonely, I'm going to pick up and phone that friend who I know, is always available. If I'm feeling sad, I'm going to do something that brings me joy, whatever that may be. And it requires conscious effort initially, but that will help to move you away from food, which sometimes, if people are feeling stressed and then they have a packet of biscuits, that then leads to guilt, which can lead to restriction, which can lead to binge eating. So that we want to break that binge restrict cycle, because food does not hold any moral value. It's not good or bad, because it's the portion size and frequency in which we eat all foods that matters. And stomach hunger. So stomach hunger is that true in inverted commas hunger that tends to build between meals. How can we best manage it? Having regular balanced meals containing enough protein, enough fiber, so enough plants, enough calories to sustain you. And if you go hungry between a meal, that's fine. I always say, think protein and produce, or protein and plants when it comes to snacks. Hummus and carrots, yogurt and berries, cheese and apple, handful of dried fruit and nuts. Are you keeping adequately hydrated throughout the day as well? So I always say, if you're doing a food diary, not only write down what you're eating, but why you're eating. Is it out of head, heart, or stomach hunger? Because that will then tell you, what do you need to work on first. And my book's divided up into weekly chapters. So as you say, it's not about overhauling everything at once. I talk about snacks and drinks in week 1, then breakfast, lunches, evening meals, and finally desserts, to break it up into manageable, like bite-sized elements.
I love that you talk about snacks, because I think people have a bit of a hate against snacks. In general health and diet, people, you can't eat snacks or eat between meals. Maybe that was one of the myths that we grew up with. But I personally, I love my yogurt in the afternoon or whatever it is. And I think carrots and hummus, another amazing snack. And it's not that they're bad, it's that a lot of the time they're the sugary snacks that give us that hit. Whereas if we just do a bit of planning, then we can have our snacks and they actually fill us up a lot more. And it's quite interesting that that's the first part that you go to, the snack part, because I think it's a lot of people's weakness. There's a lot of shame about it, isn't it? You eat between meals, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you do that. It's like, no, I get hungry. People are busy. People have active lifestyles and they're busy at work and so on. And a lot of people, I think, an excuse an excuse, I guess, for eating UPFs is it's so expensive to not eat ultra processed foods. Is that true?
So, good question. And I actually dedicate a whole chapter in the book to eating on a budget. And there are loads of ways to eat more whole foods while saving money. So, whether that be buying frozen vegetables or fruit, which require minimal preparation, they actually contain more nutrients than fresh. Can you buy own brand, like own brand wholemeal pasta, oats, rice, because it's the same ingredient, just different packaging? I think the biggest barrier to healthy eating, yes, cost, but it's time and effort. So one thing that I like to tell people to do is to cook once, eat twice. And actually, plant-based protein is cheaper than meat. So if you are making a bolognese, for example, with lean mince, can you add in a tin of lentils or kidney beans to bulk it out so you actually reduce the cost per portion and you're getting in more fiber? And tinned pulses are so much cheaper than meat. So there are lots of things that you can do, and I think meal planning is a big one, because if you are like tired and stressed, you haven't meal planned, you haven't been food shopping, then you're more likely to get a takeaway, which costs so much more money than it would have been to, reheat some leftovers the night before because you thought about it and you've cooked more than what you need. Even, cooking once, eating twice, it saves money on energy. So we always, as a family, every week we have a bolognese with kidney beans and mince. We have chicken curry that we always cook in bulk. We always have like a simple like freezer meal, like fish fingers, beans and peas. And yeah, that's like a staple, so we don't really have to think about it. And then the other meals just get slotted in. So it's like salmon and baked potatoes, always whack in another jacket potato so you can reheat it for lunch the next day. And also remember that your lunches, for example, don't need to be fancy. If you need to eat oily fish and fresh salmon is out of your budget, which, oh my gosh, it's so expensive at the moment. I think in Tesco it's like £4 or £5 for 2 fillets. Can you buy tinned? So tinned mackerel, tinned sardines, even tinned salmon, it all counts towards your oily and it's much cheaper than fresh.
What are some good lunch recipes? Because I think everybody has fallen into that horrible meal deal trap where you get this horrible sandwich that you've paid. I don't even know what a meal deal is now. It's probably £4 at least. Um, and a bag of crisps and some sort of sugary drink, or you might have gone for the Tropicana if you're really feeling healthy. What are some good meals for lunch that are easy? Because I think a lot of time and energy go into planning dinner and then lunch just kind of gets thrown aside. What are your tips for lunches?
Yeah, and do you know what? If you're having a meal deal once a week, like that's fine. If it's every day, then yeah, think of all the money that you'd save. And what I would say is with meal deals, most of the mains are classed as ultra processed. If you can get on wholemeal, like the other week, I needed to buy a meal deal because I was on the road, I hadn't prepared anything. So I got a chicken salad sandwich on wholemeal and I got a side of water and a side of fruit. So making the sides non-ultra processed is a great. And you know what? So I've just gone and picked up my book as a reminder so that I don't miss it. But on page 158, so this is week 3 lunches, I like to divide lunch ideas up into 4, which you can then rotate. So the first is on toast or on a bagel. So that's like my classic go-to, smashed avocado on toast with eggs, tomatoes, and some spinach. The second is in a wrap or in a sandwich, whether it be like chicken salad, ideally on wholemeal. The third is to think of soups, salads, or omelets. So depending on the season and how cold it is, you might want to have an omelette instead of a salad, or a vegetable soup that's really warming. Just don't forget to add protein. So, for example, some chickpeas or lentils. Don't just have a vegetable soup and expect to be full. And add a slice of wholemeal bread. And then the fourth idea is jacket potatoes and leftovers. And I put those two together just because you can add in an extra jacket potato to your oven when you're baking it for dinner the night before. So jacket potatoes and leftovers, jacket potatoes with, cottage cheese. It might be a sweet potato with some tuna, cider salad. And then leftovers can be a whole concoction of different meals. And if you are on the road, you can actually get those food flasks, which, pour some boiling water in it when you're, preparing it, heat it up in the microwave, tip out the water, add it in, and that food will actually stay hot for several hours if you're someone who likes a hot meal.
I love that. And we're also in soup season, everyone. So get your soups ready. Autumn is here. And I think that's really interesting when you said, add some sort of wholeness to your soup, not just vegetables and stock, because that's so obvious, but I never thought about that. That would be why I would be hungry if I just had a soup. So I think it's just these simple things. You're still making the soup. Also, side note, soup is so easy to make. I don't think it gets enough credit for how easy it is to make. Like soup that literally you just put your veg in, your stock, whatever it is. I it's such an easy way. It's very much a low-hanging fruit. And then you just blend it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So that's an easy way. It's also a lot cheaper than buying a tub of soup, which is actually quite expensive. So I think it's those little ways that you can just incorporate it in. And I love how you've designed your book that it's easy for people to go through and not only it's like week 1, week 2, it's not here is a whole list of every recipe that you need to change your life and your diet. People would shut that book and think, oh my goodness, this is so overwhelming. But people do want to try and fix things, but it's just knowing where to start. And with that, I want to ask you, what are some of your main things that spring to mind when I ask about nutrition misconceptions? What nutrition misconceptions are there out there in the world?
So, I mean, I suppose the first is that you need loads of supplements to be healthy. And actually, if you're eating, pretty varied and balanced diet, the only supplement really that you need in the UK is vitamin D. So we need vitamin D. You're in the UK right now, between like September and March, 10 micrograms, which is also written as 10 UG, 10 mcg. Some people need it all year round, pregnancy, breastfeeding, babies, and also folic acid if you're thinking about having a baby or if you are indeed pregnant. So all these weird and wonderful supplements, if you've got, for example, enough protein in the diet, you don't need a protein powder. Having said that though, if you are highly active and you've done a food diary and you're not, for example, having at least 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight a day, maybe adding in a supplement, scoop of whey protein or vegan plant-based blend is advantageous. But you don't need all these superfood greens and things like that. Hit your 5 a day, 5 handfuls of fruit and or veg, and your 30 different plant-based foods a week. So that's another misconception that, for example, like gut health is really complicated. Actually, it's about what are you adding in rather than taking away. And aiming for 30 different plant-based foods a week is a great starting point. And that encompasses not only fruits and veg, but your whole grains, nuts, seeds, and plant-based proteins like your beans and your pulses. And actually, top tip, different colors count towards those plant-based points. So for example, a red pepper counts as a point, and yellow pepper and green pepper, because they contain different plant chemicals that support our health.
Oh, I love that. I think that's very clear as well, to look at your plate and count all the colors, and that helps, because it is those little things that people just get a bit, oh my goodness, what is this? What am I looking at? And I want to ask a bit about like your journey with health and diet, and obviously you're at the point now where you're working as a dietitian, so you're in a hospital, is it that you work in throughout the week? But then you also are really active on social media. You've written a book, Penguin approached you to write the book. That's quite overwhelming in lots of different areas. But you're kind of being pulled at every different string, which is amazing to be able to do. But how has that journey been? It could be quite overwhelming. And I kind of think about, when someone would post online saying they're vegan, and then suddenly if they post anything that could potentially not be vegan, people call them out and say, oh my goodness, I thought you were vegan. It's that kind of criticizing that, like, with 0.5% out of a whole diet and that sort of thing. How has that been?
As a dietitian, I don't often talk about kind of like what I eat. However, I'd call myself a flexitarian. So I do eat meat and fish, but I'm trying to eat more of a plant-based diet. My son has got various food allergies, dairy, eggs, soy, and nuts. So that's quite compromised already. So I don't try to complicate it or compromise it further. So I did my undergrad degree in sports science, and I went to see a careers advisor, and I said, look, I'm interested in nutrition. I love the power of food because I had quite bad skin growing up. And she basically told me about what a dietitian it was, and I had never heard of one before. I shadowed one, and so I did my postgraduate diploma at Leeds. I also did an MSc whilst I was working. And so I worked for the NHS for 14 years. And throughout that time, I qualified in 2009, started my website in 2012, and then slowly just started putting stuff out on social media. I just trying to combat misinformation, and it kind of grew from there. And I started working privately for Ramsay Healthcare in bariatrics, which is where I am now. I work clinically in weight loss surgery. I actually left the NHS last year just because when you've got like 2 kids and you're working like 3 different jobs, like something had to give. So I left the NHS. I now still work clinically a couple of days a week, and then the rest of the time, so I'm really privileged in that. Like, I work from home, I work with brands, I write articles, create content. Obviously, like, I'm promoting my book, I get to speak to wonderful people like you. And it's really enjoyable. And I think throughout my time, I've always just maintained putting out evidence-based content. and trying to fight misinformation and just making it really practical. And also, I think I'm quite grounded in that. I'll have to some Ben and Jerry's on a Friday night. I don't lead a 100% healthy diet or lifestyle. There are some days that that I might not go for a walk, might not do my 10,000 steps, because life gets in the way. So I understand. So that's why the advice that I give is hopefully quite practical, and it's not meant to be ever overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's also what people respond to. If you kind of portray yourself out there as this squeaky clean, absolute angel of health, I don't think that's relatable to anyone because how can you possibly strive to do that? But as you say, Ben and Jerry's is not bad. If you have Ben and Jerry's every single night, you might need to think about that. But it's just that balance, which I think isn't talked about enough in health. It's kind of you're either healthy or you're not. It's not that kind of path of health and what a healthy lifestyle kind of is. And if you had to describe all of your work and all of the different jobs you do in one key message that you would like to portray, how would you say that?
I would go back to the 80/20 rule, and I'd just say, look, it's what you are eating and drinking the majority of the time that matters most. And as long as you're doing things 80% by the book, the other 20% is totally room for those soul foods. And there's always a bit of leniency. And while diet is important, don't forget about the other lifestyle factors as well. What you drink, your sleep habits, your stress habits, and also socializing as well. So socializing matters, and food actually brings us together. So yeah, never forget that. I would never ever want someone to not have someone's chocolate cake for their birthday, their best friend's birthday, because it might be ultra processed from the supermarket. Just because something is ultra processed does not make it bad. Like even a homemade chocolate cake, yes, although it might be slightly better, slightly less, less additives, it's still going to be high in fat and sugar. So it's not going to be something that you want to have every single day, like your Ben and Jerry's example. So yeah, if things sound complicated, just remember, strip it back, take it back to basics. And, I think people often forget common sense. And if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And if someone's listened to this, okay, and think that's amazing, that's great, I really want to keep in this information. What are a few easy diet hacks that are your favorite to implement into people's diets? They think, okay, now's the time. I'm going to start this. I'm going to be able to do it. Where should they start? Where should they go? What should they do? Obviously, your book is a really great place to start as well.
Yeah, so the two big tips at the start of my book, I say do a food diary, write down what are you eating and where are you eating it and why for a week as a starting point. And then that will give you direction as to what element of your diet is going to have the biggest bang for your buck. And the second is your environment. Just go into your kitchen and assess, have I got whole foods at eye level? Have I got a fruit bowl out on the side? If my biscuit tin is next to the kettle, that encourages mindless eating. So move it to an inconvenient location, which encourages pause points. So moments in time that you pause and think, do I really need it? And actually 9 times out of 10, you might not.
The pause point, I love how you phrase that because I would try and implement that even when you reach for your phone. If you wait 5 seconds, you might not even want to pick it up. It's just breaking that cycle of our brains are so quick that they go on autopilot to things that are just routine and habit. And it's just breaking those habits and making new ones that are not healthier for the sake of being healthier, but actually improve your diet, your life, your skin, your energy, and ultimately your life in general, which is really great takeaways as well. So if people want to follow you online and keep up to date and buy your book as well, where should they go?
Oh, well, thank you. No, I really enjoyed this conversation. So I mainly hang out over on Instagram, and I'm mainly Nick's Nutrition, NICS Nutrition. Also, if you've got kids, follow me over on Mummy Nutrition, where I share a little bit more lifestyle content. And then my book is available from all good bookshops, including Waterstones, WH Smith's, and also Amazon, which is super easy. And it's called How Not to Eat Ultra Processed. It's also being published in Germany and a few other countries, which is fun. So yeah, watch this space.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for coming on and chatting all things diet and nutrition and talking through the myths and the things that we actually should do. And I guess just simplifying it. I feel refreshed myself knowing actually how simple it is to just avoid some of these scary foods. And it's all about balance because it's not that anything's that bad. It's just being aware of what we're eating, what we're doing. So thank you so much for this. I will link all of those links in the description of this show so people can check it out and follow you online and get a hold of your book as well. And yeah, thanks so much for your time.
Honestly, yeah, I've really enjoyed the conversation.